Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this video lesson about World War I military technology and battles. I am Miss Jennifer Blank, and I will be your guide on this journey. All right, so we're going to do this in two parts because there's a lot of stuff to talk about. Okay, so part one is going to be about military technology, all right? And then there'll be a second video that follows with the important battles. So today, right now in this video, what we're going to talk about is military tech. So there are a couple of big technological developments that were going to be really, really important for World War I. Number one was the airplane, followed by mustard gas, the machine gun, that was a very big deal, the tank, and the submarine. And then part two, we'll talk about all those battles that are listed right there. All right, so now here's the thing to remember about new weapons. I'm just going to move my little video box right down there at the bottom. They weren't always used to their maximum capacity, mostly because people didn't fully understand how they worked. A lot of this stuff was like really state-of-the-art, like right off the line. People were still experimenting, playing around, and seeing how we could use this for military purposes. So the airplane actually, you think of it as like dropping a bunch of bombs, and you think of the fighter jets and all that kind of stuff. No. At this point, it's a flying tin can. That's what it is. You are in a very thin can, and you're flying through the air, and you're taking your life in your hands by doing it. If you can, at any point, get yourself to a museum, World War I, and take a look at these planes. Because, you're talking about like teeny tiny, like very thin, in sheets of metal that are covering this thing. So they weren't very important at first for a number of reasons. Now, because they're flying tin cans, they didn't have pressurized cabins like we have now. Like you can fly, 20,000 feet and all that, and that's because we have pressurized cabins where it maintains oxygen levels and temperatures so that people can fly, not only safely but comfortably. That did not exist in World War I. No. 1914 is not there, right? So what they were used for, because they couldn't go that high and they couldn't fly that long, they were used for like reconnaissance, for like spy stuff, looking at where the enemy was moving to or moving from, figuring out how many of that enemy was moving towards you, that sort of thing. But then, see, it's kind of a problem because then the enemy starts shooting at the planes and then shooting them down because, of course, you have to fly on the low side in order to, breathe. So the airplanes did not feature as prominently in terms of a key weapon during World War I, but because they debuted in World War I, we use them to great effectiveness in World War II. So that's why we mentioned them here, because they were a very, very big deal in World War II. And if World War I militaries hadn't experimented with it and played around with it, they wouldn't have been available for World War II. Poisonous mustard gas. So fun. Not really, not fun at all. Now, the biggest problem here was delivery, okay? If the wind was going your way or going the way that you wanted it to, it was awesome. It wiped out the enemy like there was nothing they could do about it. Virtually nothing. They were just done. They were sitting ducks, and that was it. But, slightest change of the wind, and it's your unit instead that gets wiped out by your own mustard gas, so... Yeah, because we hadn't figured out an effective delivery method that would deliver it quickly and efficiently so that the wind wouldn't have time to blow it over, or you could be far enough away so that it wouldn't blow to you, it wasn't as effective as it could have been. But again, human beings love to make improvements on, ways of killing each other. And we improved upon chemical weapons as well, unfortunately. All right, the machine gun. Now, the machine gun holds a lot of interest in popular culture, right? We see it show up in films. It's very much a piece of American culture. Now, this was extremely effective because you could just take out like thousands of people real quick, which is exactly what happened in the Battle of the Somme. Okay, that was in July 1916. This is a really big, important battle. We're going to go into more detail about this battle in the next lesson. But the big picture here that I want you to keep in mind in terms of the killing power of the machine gun, 60,000 British troops killed or wounded in the first half hour. That's 30 minutes. That's 60,000 people got shot in 30 minutes. That was unheard of at this point. Like now, we've got smart bombs and nukes and all kinds of crazy stuff, but you have to think about what it must have been like without this existing. Like you don't have this kind of technology, and all of a sudden now 60,000 people can get shot in 30 minutes. Like that's mind blowing. It's tough for anybody to wrap their head around, let alone an infantry soldier, right? So, you're looking at over 1 million people in that battle. That's how effective at killing the machine gun was. Very, very important for World War I. All right, tanks. Okay, these are huge. I mean, big, huge, gigantic freaking things. You describe like cars. Oh, it's a tank. It can go through anything. Well, this is why. So it was actually developed by the British originally, and these were vehicles that would just drive. You could just drive through anything, right? That's the euphemism, right? You just drive through like a tank. But it wasn't really used effectively. At first. So what they did was they sent in the tanks first, like followed by the foot soldiers. But actually what ended up working better was when they were used together. Instead of sending in the tanks first, foot soldiers and tanks are moving synonymously. And this forces the enemy to divert its attention. So like if it could, aim mortars just at the tanks, they could take out the tanks and then, then take out the infantry soldiers after that. But when you've got everybody moving together, then you've got to cherry pick and decide which one you're going to go after first. So it was much more efficient once they worked in tandem, went together, than when one went before the other. War at sea. Okay, so we're starting to get to the submarines, but we got to talk about a little bit of context first, right? So now the interesting thing about this, like the Americans weren't in the war at first, remember. They didn't jump in until 1917. Of course, the war breaks out in 1914. But the war at sea actually directly touched the American interests, okay? Now, this was stupid on Germany's part because the Americans would have been happy to stay out of it. The Americans were very isolationist at this point, and they would have been happy to be like, let's not even go there. They were very isolationist at this point. But, and I want you to think about this. What did the Germans do? What did they do? What ship did they go after, right? And I want you to think about that. Naval war was an economic war because it destroyed trade. So you've got neutral countries that are sending supplies that other countries have bought, that warring countries have bought. So once you start blowing up just trade vessels and not just military vessels, now you're talking about messing with the world's economy. The British were so intent on stopping Germany from resupplying that they actually set up a blockade, which was very effective. And at this point, Britain still has the world's best Navy. Germany really couldn't hold a candle to it. But they gave them a good run for their money with U-boats. Now, during times of war, all enemy merchant ships could be seized, attacked, and sunk. But there were rules. And this is where we're kind of now, it's hard for us to fathom this because the rules of engagement, of military engagement, really don't apply. With the advent of terrorism, things that used to be, you don't touch that. You only go after that. And even though you were fight at each other's throats, both sides could be counted on to not. Yeah, that's gone now. But try to imagine a time where there were certain rules. Like, for example, before you sunk the ship, you had to rescue the people on board. Like a kinder, gentler time, ironically. But those rules obviously do not apply currently. So ships of neutral nations did have the right to trade as long as they weren't carrying more material. But really, like everything is war material. Food is war material. Cloth is war material because it could be weaved into uniforms. Metal is war material because it could be used to make planes or vehicles or guns. So, as long as they weren't carrying war material, and like I said, everything's war material. So British blockade kept Americans from trading with Germany because of their superior navy, but the Americans, of course, didn't want to get into it with the British. So they were upset, and they voiced this upsetness, but it didn't come to blows, not until the Lusitania was sunk by Germany, and then the U.S. jumps in the war. So American ships were stopped and searched by the British, but they did not kill Americans. Like I said, British saw any kind of material to be war material. So, they were going to go after the ships regardless. Okay, so war at sea. This is where the Americans come into play, and this is going to be important for Germany because Germany is going to lose because of this. Americans only had minor objections to Britain doing this because trade was minor. They were doing much more trade with other countries that were involved in the war effort. So Germany tried to hit the British economy by using the U-boat or Unterseeboot. It was a modern sub. It was actually developed by two Americans. Plans were offered to the U.S. first, but rejected by the U.S. Navy. Do you see that? Offered to, stupid. This is like just as this is just as boneheaded as the Michael Jordan's high school basketball coach being like, no, dude, you can't play. I'm cutting you. Really? Imagine being the guy that cut Michael Jordan. Like, What's wrong with you? Like, seriously? But anyway, you know, that poor guy. Bad rep on his part. But anyway, so the plans offered to the U.S. and they rejected. How stupid. So they took their plans to Europe and they sold them to the people who paid the most. And the Germans, smart as they were, said, oh, yes, we want in. We will buy that. And that turned out to be a very good decision on their part. All right, so the submarine could be armed with 19 torpedoes, right? Which doesn't sound like a big deal, but at the time it really was. They made the waters around British Isles a war zone because now the British Navy had issues competing. This is how the Germans were able to give the Brits a run for their money because they could sink them from under the water. So any merchant ships were in danger of attack. There was no opportunity for escape. Any survivors most likely drowned. And at the time, German U-boats really seemed indestructible. Like, how do you get them? How could you go after them? Like, what countermeasure could you possibly use to get rid of a submarine, right? Like, that's crazy. Okay, so now I want to talk about this painting here that you see in front of you. So I want you to pause the video and I want you to just make some observations. On the next slide, I'm going to talk about it and give you some additional details, but I want you to try to figure out who the players are, like what countries are involved here and who's who. What are the ships doing? What are the actions taking place? Who is in? Who's really controlling the situation here? Who has the upper hand? So any kind of notice any flags, any actions that are being taken in the painting, and just pause, take a look. Okay, so what this was actually a propaganda postcard. This was produced, painted as a token of appreciation. This was given to people who were participating in the fundraising. They actually contributed money so that Germany could pay for submarine warfare. It was painted by this artist, Willy Stower. He was a personal friend of the Kaiser, the leader of Germany at the time. So he painted this thing, and the painting was turned then into a postcard, which was then given as a gift. It depicts a scene from Traitors' Warfare, as we talked about how the German U-boats would go after any and all ships. So a submarine that was very much like a U-27, which is a German submarine, sinks a British merchant ship. Now, her crew has boarded the lifeboats and they're rowing away, so they're going to make it. But the German U-boat is going out and sinking this British ship, right? And so think about how this could have been used effectively to get people to pay money to support the continuing effort to build submarines, right? Think about how this would be successful to get people to spend some cash. And that is the end of part 1. I will see you in part 2, where we will talk about the myriad battles that happened in World War I. I hope you learned what you needed to, and I'll see you in the next video.